Listen, I keep saying it, and I just don't know how many more times I'm going to say it before people start to believe me. This is getting dangerous. It is in schools everywhere for children as young as 5 years old. If you have kids in school and you are not paying attention to what they are learning, whether it be Zoom or in-person classes or however they're doing it, you need to pay close attention to what is being said, to what your students are being assigned. You need to listen for words like social justice, equity, white privilege, diversity, fairness, even equality, because these are the words they're using when they're starting to introduce these concepts to children. And if you find out that this nonsense is in your school system, you have got to document it, you've got to speak up, and you have got to fight back. This is the only way this problem gets solved, is when parents start to speak up and fight back. This story from the Daily Wire, just yesterday. Nebraska Department of Education's new health standards would teach kindergarteners about gender identity. The Nebraska Department of Education released a new health education framework that would teach kindergarteners about sexual and gender identity. Now, I don't know about you guys, but what I remember from kindergarten is they taught us to do the alphabet. Maybe I was reading many grade levels ahead of where I was in school. So I was reading short little books. I was coloring. I was doing recess. That's what I remember from my kindergarten experience. I don't know about you, but I do not recall learning about my sexual or gender identity when I was 5 years old, and I think that I probably would have been confused about the entire idea. According to a draft of the Education Department's Health Education Standards, kindergarteners may soon be learning about cohabitating and same-sex couples in the classroom. I mean, I don't understand why they have to be taught this specifically. I think that, and you guys know, I have zero problem with same-sex couples. I mean, gay marriage and civil unions back in the day in the 1990s, that was my political issue, that was the last great real civil rights battle, was making sure that everyone could marry who they loved as long as they were an adult and consenting, regardless of what genders were involved in the marriage. But I don't think that this stuff needs to be taught explicitly. I think that it's just a matter of presenting, listen, most people have a mom and a dad. Some people have two moms, some people have two dads. This shouldn't be presented as anything that is abnormal. It's extremely easy to teach this. I don't know why it has to be so overt. The framework encourages teachers to discuss different kinds of family structures with 6-year-olds. Examples of different family structures include single parent, blended, intergenerational, cohabitating, adoptive, foster, same gender, and interracial. Dude. Kindergarteners are not going to be able to grasp that. Kindergarteners can't even color between the dang lines. And you want them to grasp the many different types of households? Are you off your... Have you ever met a kindergartner? I don't even have kids, and I know that that's not going to work. Under the framework, first grade students would be taught the definition of gender, gender identity, and gender role stereotypes. I don't even know what those terms mean. Why does a 6-year-old need to know what those terms mean? The topic is reiterated in the second grade. You know what this is? Remember, what they told us, the reason that we had to learn calculus and algebra and all these things, and they were like, well, you just don't have a calculator with you at all times. You need to know how to do this by hand. Well, of course, now we all have calculators. We didn't need to learn any of that crap, but they made us learn it anyway. This is the same... Okay, it's not quite the same. That's probably a really bad analogy, but it's kind of like a similar thing. You don't need to teach this to kids explicitly. You just need to have them be in the world. They're going to understand it. In the third grade, the framework asked teachers to discuss the range of ways people express their gender and how gender role stereotypes may influence their behavior. Oh my God. 8 and 9-year-olds must be able to define sexual orientation. I guarantee you that if I was brought up in a school system like this that was teaching these concepts, I would have thought I was trans. This is something I have thought about extensively. I cannot tell you how badly I wanted to be a boy growing up. It was like everything even frankly up through college. Like if I had thought that I had any option to not be a girl and to be a boy, I wanted to play with the boys. I was more comfortable with the boys. I liked the boys' sports better than the girls' sports. Like, I would have taken it in an absolute heartbeat. And if at, what are you in third grade? 8? If at 8 years old, someone is saying, well, if you feel like a boy, you can transition to be a boy, I would have done it in a flipping heartbeat. There is no question. And thank God I didn't, because that's not, like, I'm not trans, and I'm not denying the existence of trans people at all by any stretch. Like, gender dysmorphia is like a real thing. And the one of the ways you treat that is by socially and or medically transitioning, depending on which route you want to take in conjunction with your therapist and your doctors. But, like, thank God I was not given that option. Thank God this was not something that was discussed, because I would have, oh my God, I can actually see it now. I would have been an absolute terror to get this done if this was the reality that I went to school under. And I don't think I'm alone in that. I think pretty much any girl that's ever been a tomboy has experienced that same thing. Discussion of transgenderism becomes more prevalent when Nebraska's elementary students reach the 4th grade. Oh, good. The framework asks students to be able to distinguish between sex assigned at birth and gender identity, and explain how they may or may not differ by the end of the school year. That means they're going to be tested on all of these concepts. 5th graders are introduced to the gender spectrum, which tells students that there are an infinite number of gender identities. Teachers are encouraged to explain the gender expression and gender identity exist along a spectrum. According to the new framework, the LGBT activism ideology becomes the most prevalent in the 6th grade. 11-year-olds are taught the specific difference between cisgender, transgender, gender non-binary, gender expansive, and gender identity. They don't need to know how is any of this going to make them better at math? How is any of this going to make them better at reading and writing? How is any of this going to teach them actual, like, history? Well, we know they're not really learning the real history of the country. They're learning the racist history of the country. How is any of this going to actually teach them real world skills? It's not. The answer is it's not. It's not going to make them better at math. It's not going to make them better at reading. It's not going to make them better at writing. It's not going to make them more confident. It's not going to make them better at speaking. It's not going to be about anything else other than advancing this ideology. 6th graders are also asked to define sexual identity and explain a range of identities related to sexual orientation. Examples include being heterosexual, bisexual, lesbian, gay, queer, two-spirit, asexual, and pansexual. The 6th grade framework spurs conversations about how prejudice, discrimination, intolerance, and bias can allegedly lead to violence. 6th graders are 11 years old. 11 years old. 11 years old. The framework's high school health classes focus on analyzing how cultural biases can affect medical diagnosis, treatment, and procedures. In the 10th grade, students are told to evaluate and explain how some laws and policies are viewed as tools of systemic racism. That's another key word that you need to be on the lookout for when you're reviewing your kids' homework. According to the Nebraska Department of Education, the framework is not a prescribed curriculum or lesson plan. It is designed to give teachers a framework which they can work from. Following the release of the framework, Nebraska's Governor Pete Ricketts released a statement calling on the Department of Education to nix the sex education plan. Oh, a rare moment of clarity. Thank you, Pete. I'm calling on the Nebraska Department of Education to scrap their proposed sex education topics that are included in the draft health standards, Ricketts says. The new standards from the department would not only teach young children age-inappropriate content starting in kindergarten, but also inject a non-scientific shift in approach to health education, and many of the new themes are sensitive topics that would be addressed by parents at home, not by schools. Ricketts claimed that the framework was developed with the help of political activists and without the input of key mainstream organizations. The Nebraska Department of Education did not respond to a request for comment at the time of publication. Here's what I know about what's going on in the schools, and I look at information every single day that people send me about what their kids are being taught. The teachers are going to do what they want to do. Let me just give you guys brass tacks. The teachers are going to do what they want to do. Almost every teacher teaching today has gone through a woke teacher education program where they were taught that all of this stuff is normal. This is how they were taught to teach. An entire generation of I don't know how we bring the schools back. I truly don't. Other than pulling your kids out and homeschooling them, because the charter schools are infected too. Private schools are infected too. Maybe to a slightly lesser degree, but they still are. I don't know how we fix this problem other than pulling kids out of schools entirely. I just don't know. It's that bad. So again, make sure you're watching your kids' homework. Make sure you see what they're learning. Make sure that you are speaking up. And again, don't look for something that's as overt as any of this. They're going to start small. They're going to start with just using these buzzwords: systemic racism, privilege, power, diversity, equity, inclusion, things like that. That's what they're going to start out with. And then it builds on each other. Oh, and you can see here over the course of years until they produce little social justice warriors who somehow mysteriously got indoctrinated into this ideology when their parents weren't paying attention. It is what it is, folks. It is what it is. That's all I've got for right now. I'll see you soon.